Cord. Hello, John.
Waterman.
So today, we're going to talk about grandparents, the role of grandparents in Ireland. So in Ireland, grandparents were once the backbone of family life, living nearby, helping to raise children and passing on traditions. But modern Ireland looks very different. Families are smaller, people move for work, and grandparents often stay in jobs well into their 60s. At the same time, creches have become essential, providing structured daily childcare for busy dual income households. So how can both be true? Grandparents as central figures while creches are overflowing. That's what got me interested, that the idea that creches are full. So the answer is that each plays a different role. Grandparents are emotional anchors these days, the storytellers, the moral guides, and keepers of family memory. Creches, meanwhile, are the everyday solution, professional, reliable, and practical. So let's talk about it, how it's changed.
Yeah, well, you're right there. Times move on, and grandparents, which were homeboards one time, now they're living into a good age, and they like a bit of travel, and so on and so forth. Now they are an anchor in many ways for at birthdays and other events that occur in families, and probably around Christmas and that type of thing, because that's where they came from. The people that's married and living and having two jobs in Dublin. It could be that some of their grannies are living in the country. Their jobs are scarce sometimes in the country, and though people now, in some ways, can do their work from home with the modern technology in computers and all the rest of it, they are able to do that. I think I knew somebody that was a representative for a surgery in New York, and they were able to live in the Mayo. They were able to arrange appointments and all the rest of it. Don't ask me how they could do it, but they were able to do it. But the business of grannies and grandfathers, because both are important, and so they still have a place. But life has moved on, and couples now are working. They nearly haven't got time for the sort of what was happened years ago when people were more at home and on farms, and there was a wider network of relatives and one thing and another. I had a lot of relatives on my father's side, thanks be to God, and they were all great. I can tell you, visiting and all the rest of it at when you made your first Holy Communion. When I made my first Holy Communion, I got visited by yours truly, and I come home with a nice jingle in my pocket. That's just a personal little anecdote about relatives. Relatives also have a part, aunts and uncles, but the grannies and grandfathers, I haven't heard a little anecdote about some granny, and there was a scrapers, Granny Grunt.
What?
She was always, Granny Grunt, she was always complaining. And they sort of said, well, when we invited her for Christmas, she'd be complaining about something. But then it's a story when the person is that sort of carry on and doesn't see the good, sees what I call bad signs on the horizon. Well, you're going to say, well, bye bye now, Granny, see you next year, kind of thing. Uh, so, but normally they were of a generous disposition, and they could be depended on to look after children if the father and mother decided to have a little holiday themselves on rearing children, and which can be a full time job, but sometimes it's shared by these creches, and the child then can learn how to mix and that at a younger age, because what children I think need more than that is stability. If the father and mother are good and leading a good life and with respect for one another, then that's a good basis. But regretfully, in modern times, because of the lack of practice of purpose in life vis-a-vis Catholic religion or another religion, if it's some other religion, it can cause what would I call it? The secular way of living your life doesn't produce the kind of stability that practicing a Catholic faith does, providing that both are doing it. If only one is doing it, they can encounter problems from the other that doesn't do it. And then the children can be divided about the thing as well. And sometimes when a person, say a Catholic, marries a person from another religion, it might look very good at the start, but as time goes on and a family comes, it becomes problematical because in some cases, depending on who's the Catholic, if it's a man, the boys are reared Catholic, and if it's a woman, the girls are reared Catholic. That kind of a situation, and that's not a good situation to be in because at the end of the day, people need a stable environment. Children need a stable environment, and they also need a father and mother that are together, and there's not this instability that they're liable to go their separate ways. That causes children a certain amount of anxiety, and it kind of can, especially girls, it can follow them through life. And they often refer to their youth. I've come across it myself with people. And when we're talking about these things, what I say to anyone that has suffered any kind of you know, dislocation in by way of parents separating and that type of thing. It doesn't matter if the parent that's rearing them is good. We hope that they are. It doesn't always be the case sometimes. So to those children that are have this problem and carry it, sometimes girls especially, I'll say to them the best way to do it is to pray for those that cause you that difficulty. Pray for them even when they're still alive, when you're maybe away from them. And that way, you begin to have a purpose. And by way, and without a doubt, practice a Catholic faith or whatever other religion you are practicing, and have a meaning in it, and meet other people of like minds that believe in the Creator, and that way of going on. That's the key. That's the cure. That's the key to dealing with difficulties that you might have encountered in childhood.
I just want to ask you, John, what are your memories of your own grandparents?
Well, when I was a baby, I was pictured with my mother and my granny on my Malone side, and she was a very jolly sort of a woman. Her maiden name was Vaughan, and my father was John Malone. My grandfather was John Malone. My father was John Malone, and yours truly is John as well. And though Augustine is at mine, my father was John James. So the grandparents, the only grandparent I that lived with us was my mother's father. And she was an only child because while her mother had children, they were all stillborn or something. And Julie's sister, a nurse, some women can have a problem. It's something in their DNA that they only have one child. It could be a boy or a girl, and it's a bit of awkward for the boy or girl that they're the only child because you need siblings that you can that you argue with if you like, and so on and so forth. But they're all a part of the family. But my mother's grandfather lived with us, and that was good. But from yours truly's point of view, he didn't have an influence on yours truly in that sense. And I'd have to say that the influences that shaped me was probably the family to a certain extent, but definitely the friends I made, which were of like mind, and we all practiced our Catholic faith, irrespective of if it was not so important in the family home. The rosary was said periodically, not as a matter of course, 7 days a week. So like that happened. But the fact that we grew up then from a young age. I was about 8 and 8.5 when we moved to Boyle, County Roscommon, which I found very good. And friends that I made there were one of the best I ever made anywhere. And they were a great help when you move from some place to another. You're dislocated and you feel a sense of loss because where you're spent your formative years is the most important part. But that foundation was good in yours truly's case. But this movement created a certain disconnect. But it took whatever you call it, whatever gifts one has to be able to assimilate and have very good friends that took the place of this dislocation. Because what it does is you begin to distrust your parents, that they don't have this ability to stay in the place that you were brought up in. That type of
Okay,
thing.
so I just want to ask you then, so what age were you when you lost, how long did you have grandparents for in your young life as a child? Did you have them for until you were 10 or 12
With
or?
grandparents, on the Malone side, my grandmother died. I was born 2 years after I died. She died young enough. She was only in her early 60s, maybe 62 or 63. She had a big family, and she was a very jolly kind of a woman, as far as I know, but strict. When the father died, she had a young family, and she reared them very good. They were all very good living. None of them stepped aside. There was two nuns in the family, and then the others all had good jobs. My father became a Garda, a policeman, and so did my uncle Edward. And they were reared in, tough times. They were tough times in the 1930s. We had the economic war that we spoke about before, from 1932 to 1938, and Britain was the business of the problem there. They caused us such trouble, and then they tried to destroy the economy. But with the war coming and the Germans, their brothers and sisters, don't forget the King and Queen in Ireland were from the Hanover family, which is Germanic. So there's a German instinct in their DNA, if you like. We have a Celtic instinct in ours. We go back a long way by way of our ancestry. We're not just blow-ins from that point of view. We go back a heck of a long way. So we have all that in our DNA, and it's a marvelous DNA to have. But the British and the business of their influence in this country, it was quite bad. And quite frankly, that can have an effect on relationships and so on and so forth. A lot of our brothers and sisters had to go abroad for for to try and live a proper life and start it fresh in the United States and other countries.
Okay,
So there's a lot involved in families that can affect the well-being of children, quite
yeah.
frankly.
I think
And
if I look at my own grandparents, so you mentioned there that that lady died
there's
in her
only one.
six. You'd only one, yeah. That lady, she died in her 60s. Okay, so I was in something very very similar. A lot of people back then in the 70s, they lived in their 60s to about maybe 63 or 65, and they actually died, because
Right,
of
yeah.
various
Yeah,
illnesses.
they
But
did, they did.
so I didn't really know my grandparents as such. I knew my grandfather, that was it. But the rest of them, I didn't know them. But
Correct. And that's
he played a great role in my life. He was a great man, and spoiled me rotten. He was
well,
fantastic.
that was good. Yeah, yeah. So that was a good experience. The grandfather on the Malone side was a different kettle of fish. He was from Limerick. My mother was from Limerick, and he was, I think, a man that seemed to live in some other world. He didn't really communicate with the offspring that I could see, and he occupied a central place in the where the fire was in the range. He had his chair there for an instant, and I think my mother saw we were more or less scrambling for a bit of heat, if you like, and especially in these hard winters. But be that as it may, he was there, and he's photographed when I made my confirmation, and that I think you saw the photograph, and he's a distinguished looking man in many ways, but he didn't have the quality of being a great help to us as we were growing up in a situation that would not be just the ideal. You like to be able to stay where you were from and all the relations. But one great advantage we had that we had was we had a great lot of aunts and uncles, and they were very helpful and kind to us all. My father used to take us when we were young into from Holt into Bewley's in Westmoreland Street, where my aunt Bunny, she was called Bunny, and not Bunny Rabbit, but Bunny, and she worked there as a waitress, and we got the best of stuff. Lovely cakes winking at you, and we used to hop down to the toilet because it was the only place that we ever saw when you put your hands in, like there was a blower and you could put it in the middle, and we used to enjoy doing that before we even had anything. Down the stairs we went, and into ladies or gents, it didn't matter what it was. We went in and washed our hands and then put our hands in this thing and the hot air coming. So
Mhm.
now they're common, of course, but at
Mhm.
that time they weren't. You had mostly had cold water, and if you wanted hot water, you had to boil a kettle on the range, so you weren't plugging it in anywhere. There was an absence of that. And when we were in Boyle, we didn't have the ESP, we had Stewart's direct current, and the lights now and again would flicker, a bit
Okay.
like a candle, if you like. So we had this experience, and I often look back on it with happy memories, funny enough. The flickering light. And in the church in the winter, you go into confession, and there were only a few lights, but they were always seemed to be flickering and they'd be lighting up their faces in the dark, and I'm all queuing for confession. There'd be about three priests holding confession, and all these ones kind of sinners. And sort of, you didn't pure thoughts, did you?
Spinners in the darkness.
it was, it was. I tell you something. I have very fond memories of the whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose, look, what we've discovered really is, I mean, I was wondering, what's happening with the creches, they're overflowing, where are the grandparents? And of course, what's actually happening is that they are living longer, that they're more of a symbolic relationship now, maybe, and grandparents than they were in the past, because they have their own
I
independent
reckon we,
lives and they're living longer.
they are, and they're travelling as well.
Yeah.
They don't want to be stuck around looking at little nippers and them whinging and looking for this, that, and the other, and maybe dislike them. I think I remember one time when we were living in Carrickmacross for a while, there was a father and mother bringing their two children to meet the grandparents living in one of these nice houses. And because if they weren't complaining, I don't want to go, and I just said, imagine that attitude. Now that's a nice few years ago. And to think like that they had that attitude, which was very strange to yours truly, because I certainly, if I had grandparents living somewhere and were visiting them, I'd be looking forward to it because you were surely going to get treats. When I visited my aunts and uncles, there was always treats. You might get a few shillings and stuff
You
like
see,
that. So,
the thing about
yeah.
grandparents is that they accepted you and spoiled you unconditionally, and that was the great thing about them. And
And
so
that's if you were lucky to have them
yeah,
in that shape or form, and they were of that variety because some of them were of a different variety. They were often a bit on the cranky side, shall we say, ipso facto. They weren't just a jolly sort of humorous individuals. So I think, if you had the experience of a good grandfather that spoiled you, you can count your blessings because some other ones mightn't, they might have grandparents that mightn't be just filling the bill that we like to think. But they did do good, and it's good to have your grandparents and know where you come from and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? And to have aunts and uncles that are good. I know on your father's side you didn't have many there. You just have father and your lovely Aunt Mary, a marvelous person to my way of thinking, and great, and your father as well, Pat. And so all these people are, as far as I'm concerned, Jews. And you don't get that many like that when you go about. Because I've met quite a few in my time and been of that travelling sort of, travelling salesman. It wasn't like the ones in the Wild West bringing their goods and getting up on the podium and who will buy this and looking for kind of accident or stuff, So, but yeah, it was as far as I'm concerned, a great education experience to come across people in all walks of life and get to know them. And some you couldn't ask for better. I was at funerals here, there, and yonder
So there we
because
go.
and yeah, there we go. So anyway, that's the grandparents. You're quite right, and about their importance that they play in the life of children. But now they're looking after themselves in a different way, and they're traveling. And now, thank you very much. Themselves and the husband, their married person is still alive, and they can be looking across at one another and perhaps talking about this, that, and the other. So yeah, right, Oliver.
Okay, thank you, John.
Cheery boy.
Bye now.